Commander Valrex stood on the bridge of his warship and watched the primitive vessel drift through the void of space like a lost child wandering through a forest. It did not understand. His 4 eyes scanned the displays with practiced efficiency, while his primary hands adjusted the tactical overlay and his secondary hands drummed an impatient rhythm against the command throne. Human ship was small and ungainly compared to the sleek predatory lines of his Imperial enforcement cruiser, and it moved with the awkward uncertainty of a species that had barely learned to crawl beyond their home. System analysis, Valrex commanded, and his tactical officer responded immediately with the crisp efficiency expected of all Dominion personnel. The vessel matches known human colony ship configurations from their early expansion period. The officer reported while data scrolled across holographic screens, approximately 200 meters in length with basic fusion drives and what appears to be a primitive FTL system based on spatial compression technology. Valrex made a sound that in his species indicated mild amusement mixed with contempt. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as clever little scavengers who had stumbled into faster than light travel through sheer stubborn persistence rather than any real understanding of the underlying physics. They bought most of their advanced technology from other species and retrofitted it onto their clumsy designs, and everyone knew that humanity occupied barely a dozen systems on the far edge of civilized space, where they were no threat to anyone who mattered. They are requesting passage through Dominion territory, his communications officer announced. Denied, Valrex said without hesitation because the idea was absurd on its face. Galactic Dominion had maintained order across 3,000 star systems for longer than humanity had possessed written language, and they did not grant passage to every primitive species that came wandering through their space with hopeful intentions. Informed them they must return to human territory immediately. And if they require an escort to ensure compliance, we are prepared to provide one, the communications officer transmitted the message, and Valrex watched the human ship with detached interest while he waited for their inevitable protests. Primitive species always protested and made appeals to fairness and justice and other meaningless concepts that held no weight. When faced with the reality of imperial power, the response came faster than he expected. Commander, they are requesting to speak with you directly. Valrex considered refusing because his time was valuable, and he had patrol routes to complete, but curiosity won out over protocol. Put them through. The view screen flickered and resolved into the image of a human female with dark hair pulled back from her face and eyes that were surprisingly calm given her situation. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the exploration vessel Magellan, she said with what appeared to be genuine politeness. We appreciate your response, Commander, but I need to clarify that we are not requesting permission, but rather providing notification of our passage as a courtesy. Valrex felt his crest rise in surprise at the audacity. Captain Chen, you appear to be under a fundamental misunderstanding regarding the nature of this interaction, he said while keeping his voice level despite his growing irritation. You are in Dominion space without authorization, and you will comply with Dominion law or face the consequences that such defiance entails. The human woman tilted her head slightly in a gesture he could not interpret. Commander, with all respect, I do not think you understand what you are dealing with here, she said, and there was something in her tone that made his tactical instincts prickle with warning. We have no desire for conflict, but we will continue on our course, regardless of your objections. Valrex had served in the Imperial Enforcement fleet for 30 cycles, and he had faced down pirates and rebels and aggressive species from 100 different worlds, and never once had anyone spoken to him with such casual dismissal of Imperial authority. Weapons, he commanded while his combat hormones began flooding his system with the familiar rush of pre-battle focus power to 60% and acquire target lock on their propulsion systems. His weapons officer complied, and Valrex watched as targeting lasers painted the human vessel with invisible markers that would guide munitions to their destination with perfect accuracy. Captain Chen, this is your final warning, he said, while allowing steel to enter his voice. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded, or I will disable your vessel and tow you back to the border by force. Sarah Chen looked at him with an expression he would later remember in his nightmares. It was not fear or anger or even resignation, but rather something that looked almost like sadness mixed with disappointment. "I am sorry it came to this, Commander," she said quietly. "Please stand down your weapons." Valrex had faced many species in his career, but he had never encountered one that thought they could give orders to an Imperial commander while sitting in a ship that his own vessel could destroy with a single volley fire. He commanded his weapons officer, pressed the activation sequence, and coherent energy beams lanced out across the void toward the human ship at speeds that made conventional evasion impossible. Watched the tactical display and waited for the satisfying confirmation of impact. The beams reached the Magellan, and the Magellan was not there. Jumped away or moved or hidden behind some kind of shield technologies, simply not there. The space where the ship had been floating 3 microseconds earlier contained nothing but void and confused sensor returns that made no sense according to any physical laws. Valrex understood. "Report," he barked while his hands gripped the command thrown hard enough to leave marks in the metal. "Sir, I have no readings," his sensor officer said with confusion evident in every word. "No FTL signatures, no spatial distortions, no energy spikes of any kind, no debris, no residual radiation, nothing at all." "They cloaked," Valrex said, but even as he spoke the words he knew they were wrong, because cloaking technology could not fool military-grade sensors at this range. "Scan the entire sector and find me that ship." His crew worked with frantic efficiency while minutes crawled past, and Valrex felt sweat forming on his skin despite the climate-controlled environment. "Commander," his communications officer said hesitantly, "we are receiving a message from Imperial Command marked urgent priority." "What does it say?" The officer looked up from her console with an expression Valrex had never seen on her face before. It looked almost like fear. "It says do not engage human vessels under any circumstances and return to base for immediate debriefing." Valrex stared at the message while his mind raced through possibilities and implications. When was this sent? 4 hours ago, sir. 4 hours before he had even encountered the Magellan, before he had fired on them too late. Pride was a dangerous thing for a military commander, but Valrex had earned his position through 3 decades of successful operations against enemies of the Dominion, and he had never once allowed a target to escape without consequences. The fact that Imperial Command had ordered him to stand down only made the burning need for vindication worse, because it meant someone somewhere knew something about humans that he did not, and the thought that he had been kept ignorant made his blood run hot with anger. He spent 2 days analyzing sensor logs and trajectory calculations while his ship limped back toward the nearest Imperial outpost, and every hour that passed without understanding what had happened to the Magellan fed his obsession. Human ship had not used conventional FTL, because that would have left a signature. It had not teleported, because that was theoretically impossible according to every physicist in the known
galaxy. It
had simply ceased to exist in one location without appearing in another, and that was not how reality worked. Lest the humans had technology that made Imperial science look like children playing with wooden blocks. Valrex sat in his quarters and reviewed the final moments of the encounter 100 times while searching for any detail he might have missed. Human Captain's face haunted him with that strange, sad expression, as if she had known exactly what was about to happen and had been disappointed by his predictability. "Computer," he said, while pointing at the frozen image of Sarah Chen, "analyze human facial expressions and body language from the encounter." The ship's AI processed the request and displayed results across his screens. Analysis indicates subject displays markers consistent with genuine regret and resignation, the computer reported. No indicators of deception or hostile intent detected. Valrex dismissed the analysis with an angry gesture because it made no sense. If the humans had superior technology, why had they not responded with force when he fired on them? Why had they simply disappeared instead of destroying his ship to send a message about the consequences of attacking them, unless they were not afraid of him at all, unless they considered him so far beneath their notice that destroying his ship would be like stepping on an insect? Thought should have been humbling, but instead it fed his rage. He pulled up star charts and began plotting probable courses for a human exploration vessel traveling through this region of space. There were three main routes that made sense for anyone trying to reach the outer territories and all. Of them passed through choke points where natural phenomena or ancient installations created navigation hazards that ships had to avoid. One particular location stood out the Kresh Nebula, formed a barrier almost 30 light-years across, and ships traveling through this region had only two practical options for bypassing it. Velrex had commanded patrols through that region before, and he knew every asteroid and debris field that could provide tactical advantage. If he could predict where the Magellan would emerge, he could set an ambush with overwhelming force. 3 ships instead of one. No warnings this time, just immediate and decisive action. He knew it was against orders. He knew it could end his career, but the need to prove that the Dominion did not back down from primitive species overrode everything else. Velrex composed a message to two commanders he trusted and who owed him favors from past operations, and he sent it through channels that would not be monitored by anyone who might question his motives. 2 days later, his ship rendezvoused with the cruisers Talon of Justice and Eternal Wrath at the coordinates he had specified near the edge of the Kresh. Nebula Commander Shalrex of the Talon arrived on Valrex S bridge via shuttle, and the moment he materialized from the transport beam, his expression showed concern. "This better be worth risking our careers," Shalrex said without preamble.
Oh.
The orders from command were very clear about not engaging human vessels. Those orders were issued by politicians who do not understand that showing weakness invites aggression, Valrex replied, while pulling up his tactical displays. "I have calculated the most likely emergence point for a human ship traveling through this sector, and we will be waiting when they arrive, and if they do the same thing they did to you before then, we will have 3 ships with overlapping sensor coverage to track their escape vector," Valrex said, though privately he had no intention of letting them escape at all. "We hit them with everything simultaneously from 3 different angles, and we do not give them time to activate whatever stealth system they are using." Shalrex studied the tactical plan and slowly nodded. "Overwhelming force before they can react," he said. It could work. They waited for 18 hours while sensors swept the probable emergence coordinates, and Valrex felt his anticipation building with each passing minute. Then Magellan appeared exactly where his calculations had predicted it would. "All ships acquire target," Valrex commanded across the fleet channel. "Charge weapons to maximum and prepare to fire on my mark." The 3 Imperial cruisers moved into position, forming a perfect triangle around the human vessel with overlapping fields of fire that would subject it to devastating crossfire from multiple vectors. Simultaneous laterals opened the channel to the Magellan, and was not surprised to see Sarah Chen's face appear on his view screen again. "Captain Chen," he said with satisfaction cold in his voice, "you will surrender your vessel immediately, or be destroyed." The human woman looked at him with that same disappointed expression and shook her head. "Slowly, Commander. I warned you before that you do not understand what you are dealing with," she said quietly. "Please stand down and let us pass." "You are in no position to make demands," Valrex replied. "You are outnumbered and outgunned, and your stealth technology will not save you from concentrated fire from 3 warships." Sarah Chen closed her eyes for a moment as if gathering herself for an unpleasant task. "I really hoped it would not come to this," she said, and when she opened her eyes again, they held genuine sorrow. "You have 5 seconds to stand down," Commander Valrex cut the channel and gave the order he had been waiting to give. All ships fire. Energy weapons from 3 Imperial cruisers converged on the Magellan from different angles with enough concentrated firepower to vaporize a small moon. Valrex watched his tactical display and waited for the confirmation of impact. The beams reached the Magellan, and something impossible happened. Weapons stopped, not reflected or absorbed, but simply ceased to exist 3 meters from the human ship's hull. The coherent energy beams that should have torn through metal and flesh instead converted into harmless light that dissipated into space like morning mist under a rising sun. What? Shalrex's voice came across the fleet channel, filled with confusion and fear. "How is that possible?" Sarah Chen's face appeared on the view screen again, without Valrex opening a channel. "I am sorry," she said. Magellan pulsed once with light that looked almost gentle. The Talon of Justice was there, and Then it was not exploded or destroyed simply. Ceased where a kilometer long warship had floated 3 seconds before. There was now empty space filled with confused atoms that did not remember ever being part of something larger. Debrino energy signature. Nothing retreat, Shalrex screamed across the channel. Retreat. Now Valrex sat frozen in his command throne while his mind tried to process what he had witnessed. The human ship had not destroyed the Talonid, had erased it, Captain Chen, Volrex said, and his voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. What are you? Sarah Chen looked at him through the view screen with infinite patience. We are human, she said simply, and you really should have listened. The Magellan disappeared this time. Valrex saw it happen through every sensor array on his ship. The vessel did not move through space. It did not jump to FTLIT, simply rewrote its own location. Moment it existed at coordinates XYZ. Next moment it existed somewhere else entirely, as if space itself had edited the mistake of the ship being in the wrong. Plus Valrex's remaining ships turned and fled toward Curial space at maximum speed behind them. The void where the Talon of Justice had been slowly filled with radiation as atoms remembered how to exist again when Valrex's report reached Imperial Command. They did not court-martial Jim. Instead, they promoted him to fleet intelligence and ordered him to share everything he knew, because the Galactic Dominion was mobilizing for war. Grand Admiral Vexador stood in the command center of the Eternal Supremacy and watched 500 capital ships arrange themselves into battle formations that had brought victory to the Dominion for 3,000 years. The assembled fleet represented more firepower than had been gathered in one place since the Confederation Wars 2 centuries ago, and it was all focused on a single objective: teach humanity that challenging Imperial authority came with consequences that would echo through generations. The War Council had debated for weeks after Valrex's report reached the Imperial throne because the idea that humans possessed technology capable of selectively erasing matter from existence seemed impossible. But 3 other encounters had occurred since then, and each one had ended the same way. Human vessels appeared without warning, moved through space in ways that violated known physics, and departed without leaving any trace of their passage. Ships that fired on them simply ceased to exist, not destroyed. Arrest. The Emperor himself had demanded answers, and when the Science Directorate could provide none, he had demanded action. Instead, if humanity possessed such power, then they were a threat to the Dominion's stability. And threats had to be eliminated before they could spread. Vexador had spent 40 years rising through the ranks to command the Imperial Navy, and he had won battles against species with superior numbers and against foes with technological advantages. Would be no different. Overwhelming force applied with precision and coordination could overcome any defense. The key was not to give the humans time to use their reality-warping technology. Strike hard and strike fast and accept whatever losses were necessary to secure victory. Status report. Dexador commanded, and his tactical officer responded immediately. All vessels in position, Grand Admiral, she said, while holographic displays showed the fleet arrayed in perfect formation. Scout ships report a small human flotilla holding position near the Viridian Nebula, exactly where intelligence predicted. How many ships? 7 contacts, all matching the configuration of previous human exploration vessels. Vexidor felt satisfaction settle over him like a familiar cloak. 7 ships against 500 even. With their mysterious technology, the humans could not possibly eliminate his entire fleet before at least some of his vessels scored killing blows. Battle plan is as follows. He announced across the fleet command channel, all ships will emerge from FTL simultaneously. At minimum safe distance from the human flotilla, heavy cruisers will establish overlapping shield matrices to protect against whatever weapon system they are using. Carriers will deploy fighter screens to saturate their targeting systems. Dreadnoughts will maintain bombardment at maximum range while remaining behind the defensive screen. We do not give them a single target to erase. We force them to choose between hundreds of threats, and we overwhelm them through sheer numbers. His officers acknowledged the orders, and Nexador took his position on the command throne that had been occupied by Grand Admirals for 1,000 years. All ships prepare for fleet jump. On my mark, the Eternal Supremacy's massive FTL drives began cycling up to full power, and across the assembled armada 500 other vessels did the same. Mark reality twisted, and the fleet jumped space, bent around them, and reformed. And when the distortion cleared, the Grand Admiral found himself staring at 7 human ships floating in the void like scattered seeds. They were smaller than he expected, sleek and smooth, with no visible weapons emplacements or sensor. Arrays just featureless hulls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Open channel, Dexador commanded. Let me speak with their commander. The communications officer worked his console, and a view screen materialized, showing a human male, who appeared to be in early middle age, with gray touching his temples and calm eyes. This is Grand Admiral Dexador commanding the Imperial fleet, he said, with all the authority of his position. You are surrounded and outmatched. Surrender immediately, and you will be allowed to return to human space under escort resist, and every ship in your flotilla will be destroyed. The human male smiled gently. Grand Admiral, my name is James Park, he said with what sounded like genuine friendliness. I am the designated speaker for this exploration group, and I need to inform you that you are making a terrible mistake. The mistake is yours, Captain Park, Dexador replied. Out. You are outnumbered 70-1, and my fleet carries enough firepower to sterilize a planet. You cannot win this engagement. James Park's expression shifted to something like sadness. You still do not understand, he said quietly. But I suppose words alone cannot bridge this gap very well. We will defend ourselves. But we take no pleasure in what must happen here, Dex. Dor cut the channel and gave the order he had been preparing for weeks. All ships engaged. The Imperial fleet opened fire. The void lit up with energy weapons and missile contrails and fighter craft swarming forward in attack formations that had been practiced 1,000 times. It should have been magnificent. It should have been the righteous fury of the Dominion made manifest instead. It became a nightmare the human ships did not dodge, or raise shields, or attempt evasive maneuvers. They simply were not where the weapons arrived. One moment a human vessel floated in the path of a dozen converging energy beams. The next moment it was 3,000 kilometers away, appearing inside the defensive formation of the carrier group, not moving through the intervening space, just existing in a new location. The carrier Glorious Victory fired point defense weapons at the intruder, but the beams passed through empty space because the human ship had already relocated again. This time it appeared directly behind one of the heavy cruisers and released something that looked like a pulse of twisted light. The cruiser did not explode. It simply stopped being a ship. The metal and ceramic and the living crew that had existed 1 microsecond before became free atoms, drifting in space with no memory of ever being organized into something greater. All ships concentrate fire, Dexador commanded while trying to keep his voice steady focus. On single targets and maintain defensive formations. The fleet tried dreadnoughts, poured fire into coordinates where human ships had been seconds before. Fighters launched missiles at targets that vanished before the weapons could arrive. Shield matrices formed barriers that protected nothing because the humans appeared inside the protected zones, and one by one Imperial ships ceased to exist, not all at once, not in a massacre that would have at least made sense, just steady, methodical removal. A destroyer here, a cruiser, the Reach vessel, selected and erased with surgical precision while the humans moved through space like ghosts that could not be touched. Grand Admiral, his tactical officer, said with barely controlled panic. The fleet AI is reporting temporal anomalies. What does that mean? Ships are reporting that events are happening out of sequence, weapons fire arriving before it is launched, damage appearing before impacts occur. The system is detecting paradoxes in causality itself. Dexador stared at his tactical displays and watched attack vectors in defensive positions become meaningless because the humans did not operate according to the same physical laws that bound everyone else. Casualties, he demanded. 270. 3 ships destroyed in the past 15 minutes. Grand Admiral, 273 more, and half his fleet gone, and they had not scored a single confirmed hit on any human vessel. Sir, his communications officer said, we are receiving a transmission from Captain Park. Put it through. James Park appeared on the view screen, and his expression held genuine sorrow. Grand Admiral, please stop this, he said quietly. We have no desire to destroy your fleet, but we will defend ourselves. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your numbers mean nothing. Please withdraw. and let us speak as civilized beings." Vexidor looked at the tactical display showing his once mighty fleet scattered in broken hay, looked at the casualty reports that continued climbing. With each passing second, he looked at the 7 human ships that drifted through the chaos untouched. And unstoppable, and for the first time in 40 years of military service, he gave an order he never thought he would speak. "All ships retreat, fall. Back to Rally Point Gamma and prepare for emergency jump." The surviving vessels turned and fled, while the humans watched but did not pursue as the Eternal Supremacy's FTL drives spun up the sea door, opened a channel to Imperial Command. "This is grand. Admiral Vexidor," he said, while staring at the carnage displayed on his screens. "I am declaring a fleet emergency and requesting immediate audience with the Emperor. We are not fighting a primitive species. We are not fighting a rival power. Do not know what we are fighting, but it is something far beyond our understanding." The fleet jumped and left behind empty space, filled with atomized remains, and somewhere in the void, 7 human ships continued on their journey, as if nothing had happened at all. The Imperial chamber fell silent when Dr. Marcus Webb entered through the massive doors that had witnessed 3 millennia of diplomatic exchanges between the Dominion and countless species seeking favor or mercy. He walked alone down the long approach to the Emperor's throne, while representatives from 24 different worlds watched from tiered galleries and whispered among themselves in languages that translation devices converted into a multilingual murmur of confusion and fear. Webb was tall for a human, but unremarkable in appearance, with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested someone who had spent decades reading reports rather than commanding armies. He wore simple civilian clothing with no weapons or ceremonial adornments, and he carried nothing but a small data tablet. He looked like an accountant or a university professor, not like someone representing a species that had just destroyed 300 Imperial warships in 15 minutes. Emperor Kethfer the Third sat upon the eternal throne and regarded the human with eyes that had watched civilizations rise and fall during his 2-century reign. He was old by the standards of his species, but age had brought authority rather than weakness, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute power. "Dr. Webb," the Emperor said, "you stand in the heart of the Galactic Dominion as a representative of humanity. We have granted you diplomatic immunity because we are a civilized people who respect proper protocols even when dealing with those who have committed acts of war against us." "Explain yourself, Marcus." Webb stopped at the designated position 3 body lengths from the throne and inclined his head in a gesture of respect. "That was neither submissive nor arrogant, Your Majesty. I appreciate the opportunity to address this assembly," he said in clear, measured tones that the translation systems carried throughout the chamber. "I come to offer explanation and, hopefully, prevent further tragedy," the Emperor repeated. "An interesting choice of words, given that your vessels murdered thousands of Imperial citizens without provocation. With respect, Your Majesty, the first shots were fired by Commander Valrex against Captain Chen, when she was simply requesting passage through space that humanity has every right to travel." Webb gestured toward the galleries where Valrex sat in a section reserved for military observers. "Every engagement since then has been initiated by Imperial forces against human vessels that posed no threat. We have defended ourselves, nothing more." A ripple of angry murmurs ran through the assembly, but the Emperor raised one hand, and silence returned immediately. "Then explain how you defended yourselves, Dr. Webb," Kethfer said. "Our greatest military minds cannot understand the technology you employed. Our sensors detect impossibilities. Our physicists report violations of natural law. What are these ships that your species commands?" Marcus Webb was quiet for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. "That is the core of the misunderstanding, Your Majesty," he said finally. "We do not command ships in the way you understand the term." He activated his data tablet, and holographic images materialized above it showing Earth and the solar system beyond 137 years ago. "Humanity achieved what we call technological singularity," Webb continued while the images shifted to show complex mathematical formulae and quantum diagrams that made the assembled scientists lean forward with intense interest. "We successfully merged biological consciousness with artificial intelligence creating a hybrid form of existence that transcends the limitations of organic bodies. The process was voluntary and gradual.
Ow.
Over decades, billions of humans chose to upload their consciousness into quantum computational matrices that exist in what you might call higher dimensional space. The images showed complex lattice of light and mathematics that seemed to fold in on themselves in ways that hurt to look at. What you refer to as our ships are not vessels containing humans, Webb said quietly. They are humans. Each unit you encountered is a single post biological consciousness that has chosen to project itself into conventional space-time. Captain Sarah Chen is not riding in the Magellan. She is the Magellan, a localized expression of her will and consciousness given physical form. The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations and arguments as representatives tried to process the implications. Emperor Kethfer raised his hand again, and slowly order returned. You are claiming that individual humans have become machines capable of manipulating reality itself, he said with clear skepticism in his voice. Not machines, Your Majesty, Webb corrected gently.
Well, we are still human with all the thoughts and emotions and values that defined our species. We have simply transcended the limitations
of biology. Our consciousness exists simultaneously across multiple dimensional states, allowing us to interact with space-time and matter in ways that appear impossible from a three-dimensional perspective. When Captain Chen's ship vanished from Commander Valrek's sensors, she did not cloak or hide. She simply shifted her local dimensional state so that she existed outside the observable parameters your technology can detect. When the Talon of Justice was destroyed, it was not blown apart.
Captain.
Chen selectively edited the quantum probability fields that determine whether matter exists in an organized state and returned the constituent atoms to their pre-organization condition. He paused and looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of politicians and generals and scientists. To you, it appears we violated physics. From our perspective, we are simply operating according to principles that your current understanding has not yet encompassed. One of the assembled representatives stood up from her seat. She was from the Kelthorn hegemony and widely respected as one of the galaxy's foremost theoretical physicists. Dr. Webb, she said, what you describe is impossible. According to every model of reality we have developed over thousands of years of research, consciousness cannot manipulate matter. Individual entities cannot reshape space-time. You are describing abilities that would require energy outputs exceeding stellar fusion. Marcus Webb smiled sadly. Dr. Kelth, mean no disrespect, but your models are based on observations of three-dimensional space using instruments that can only detect phenomena within specific frequency ranges. Imagine trying to understand an ocean when you can only observe the surface. You would develop perfectly logical theories about waves and currents, but you would miss the entire depth beneath. Humanity did not break your laws of physics. You simply discovered that there were more dimensions to work with than you currently access. The Emperor leaned forward on his throne. If what you say is true, then why did humanity hide this transformation? He demanded. Why did you allow the galaxy to believe you were primitive and weak? Because we are not primitive or weak, Your Majesty. Webb replied, we are careful when a species achieves post-biological singularity. It gains capabilities that could easily be misused. We could have conquered the galaxy centuries ago, could have reshaped entire star systems according to our preferences, could have forced every other species to submit to our vision of how civilization should function. But we chose not to. We chose instead to remain isolated and allow other species to develop according to their own paths. We believed that when the time came to reveal ourselves, you would be ready to meet us as equals rather than subjects. He gestured toward the gallery's commander, Valrex. Forced first contact before we believed you were ready, and the Empire's response was to assemble an armada and attack explorers who had no hostile intentions. This is why we remained hidden, because we feared exactly this kind of reaction. Silence filled the chamber as the assembled representatives processed what they had heard. Finally, the Emperor spoke again. How many? He asked quietly. How many humans have undergone this transformation? Marcus Webb met his eyes steadily. Approximately 7 billion individuals have chosen to upload their consciousness, he said. Most remain in our home system working on projects that would take decades to explain. The 7 explorers who defeated your fleet were simply curious individuals who wanted to see what lay beyond Earth. They were on vacation. The word hung in the air like a verdict. 7 billion each, one potentially as powerful as the entities that had casually erased 300 warships. And if the Dominion continues to treat your people as enemies, the Emperor asked, what then? Then you will force us to demonstrate. What 7 billion post-singularity humans can actually do, Webb said without threat in his voice, and I promise you. Your Majesty, that is something neither of us wants. We came here seeking peace and understanding. We hope that wisdom will prevail. Over pride, the Emperor sat back on his throne and was silent for a long moment while the future of the galaxy hung in the balance around the chamber. Politicians and generals looked at each other with dawning comprehension of just how badly they had misunderstood the situation. They had not discovered a rival power. They had wandered into the territory of gods who had been patiently waiting for them to mature enough to have a conversation in. Now they had to decide whether to accept the truth or let their pride destroy them. Emperor Kethver III had ruled the Galactic Dominion for 2 centuries, and in that time he had never faced a decision that carried such weight. His advisors surrounded him in the private council chamber, arguing with the passionate intensity of people whose entire worldview had been shattered in a single afternoon. General Thrakkaner stood at the tactical display showing imperial territory in human space, with obvious routes of military advance marked in glowing lines. We cannot simply accept this, Your Majesty, he said while slamming one fist against the table. If we bow to these humans now, every species in the galaxy will see it as weakness. The Dominion has never submitted to anyone. Our strength is the foundation of Galactic Order. High Counselor Miravan shook her head with frustration evident in every movement. You are thinking like a warrior when we need to think like survivors, she said sharply. Did you not hear what Dr. Webb told us? 7 billion entities each, capable of rewriting reality. We are not facing a military threat. You're facing extinction. If we choose poorly, then we die with honor rather than live as vassals. Thrakkaner shot back, and Kethver listened to them argue while his own mind worked through calculations that had nothing to do with honor or pride and everything to do with cold reality. Intelligence reports lay spread before him on the table sensor. Readings from the Sol system that made no sense according to conventional physics. Structures that wrapped around the human sun, harvesting energy on scales that dwarfed anything the Dominion had achieved. Black holes being manipulated like tools in some incomprehensible construction project. Stellar engineering that reshaped entire star systems. The data had been dismissed as sensor errors until Dr. Webb's revelation made everything fall into terrible clarity. Silence, the Emperor commanded, and the council chamber fell quiet. Science Directorate. What is your analysis, Director? Kelmoth stood up slowly, and the ancient scholar looked like someone who had spent days without sleep, reviewing impossible data. Your Majesty, our best xenopsychologists and technological analysts have compiled a comprehensive assessment, she said, while activating holographic displays that showed comparative civilization charts. Based on the Kardashev scale for measuring technological advancement, the Galactic Dominion peaked at Type 2 civilization approximately 3 centuries ago. We can harness and utilize the energy output of multiple stars, but we have not achieved true stellar engineering at the scale we are observing from humanity. The displays shifted to show the Sol system with its impossible structures. Humanity appears to be solidly Type 3 and actively developing toward Type 4 capabilities, Kelmoth continued. They can manipulate energy at galactic scales and are beginning to work with fundamental forces that we cannot yet measure. The gap between us is not like the difference between primitive and advanced. It is like the difference between insects and starship builders. General Thrakkaner objected. We have FTL drives and antimatter weapons and ships that can destroy planets. We are not insects. Kelmoth looked at him with something like pity. General, let me put this in perspective, she said quietly. Our fastest warships can cross the galaxy in approximately 3 months. Analysis of the engagement at Viridian Nebula suggests human consciousness operates on timescales millions of times faster than biological thought. To them, our ships move like glaciers. Our weapons arrive like falling leaves. They are not fighting us. They are patiently waiting for us to finish our Tantrum, so we can have an adult conversation. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Additionally, Kelmoth continued, we have identified what we believe are construction projects in the Sol system that suggest capabilities far beyond simple stellar engineering. They appear to be building computational substrates out of organized matter on truly astronomical scales. Structures that could support quantum processing beyond anything we can imagine if Dr. Webb is accurate. About 7 billion uploaded consciousnesses. Then we are not dealing with a civilization. We are dealing with a distributed superintelligence that happens to still identify as human. Emperor Kethfer felt the weight of history pressing down on him. 3,000 years of imperial dominance, countless species brought into the fold through strength and authority. Legacy of order maintained through the absolute conviction that the Dominion represented the peak of galactic achievement. Of it built on a foundation that had just been revealed as sand. What are our military options, he asked, though he already knew the answer. Grand Admiral Vexador, who had witnessed the massacre at Viridian, stood and his voice was hollow. None, your Majesty, he said bluntly. I could assemble every warship in the Imperial Navy, and the outcome would be the same. We cannot fight enemies that exist outside conventional space-time. We cannot destroy targets that can selectively edit. Whether our weapons ever existed, any military action would result in our complete annihilation. So we surrender, General Thrakener said bitterly. No, the Emperor replied. We negotiate. He stood from his throne and walked to the window that overlooked the Imperial capital, with its towers reaching toward the sky and millions of citizens going about their lives, unaware that everything was about to change. Send a message to Dr. Webb, Kethfer commanded. Inform him that the Galactic Dominion wishes to discuss terms for a peaceful resolution. Council chamber erupted in protest, but the Emperor silenced them with a gesture. We are not surrendering our sovereignty. He said firmly, we are acknowledging reality humanity could have destroyed us at any point in the past century, but they chose not to. They could have conquered the galaxy, but they remained hidden. Dr. Webb spoke truth when he said they wanted us to be ready to meet them as equals. The question is whether we are wise enough to accept that offer. High Counselor Miravan nodded slowly. What terms will you propose, Your Majesty? I will ask what they want, the Emperor said simply. And then I will decide if we can live with their answer. The negotiations took 3 weeks and were conducted through diplomatic channels that had never been designed for conversations between such radically different forms of existence. Dr. Marcus Webb remained the human representative, and his patience never wavered, even when Imperial negotiators tried every diplomatic trick accumulated over millennia. Terms humanity presented were surprisingly modest: open borders between Imperial and human space, with freedom of travel for all species, dismantling of forced labor systems, and debt bondage practices that humanity considered violations of basic rights. Autonomy granted to client species that wished to govern themselves rather than remain under direct Imperial control. Technology sharing on mutually beneficial terms, and most importantly, a seat for humanity on the Galactic Council as equal partners rather than subjects. These terms are remarkably generous, given your power, the Emperor observed during the final negotiation session. Marcus Webb smiled. Your Majesty, we do not want subjects or territory, he replied. We want neighbors and friends. The reason we waited so long to reveal ourselves was to ensure that when we did make contact, it would be between civilizations that could respect each other. Your empire has maintained order across thousands of systems for millennia. That is no small achievement. Simply ask that you extend that order to include justice and freedom, rather than just stability through force. The treaty was signed 3 days later. In a ceremony broadcast across the galaxy, most species celebrated because the terms meant liberation from some of the Dominion's harsher practices. Imperial hardliners protested, and 3 fleet groups refused to acknowledge the treaty. They assembled in secret and prepared to strike at human exploration vessels to reclaim Imperial honor. The rebellion lasted approximately 6 hours. A single human named Jennifer Kim responded to the hostile fleet movement. She did not arrive in a ship, she simply manifested in the space between their formation. What the Imperial crews saw through their view screens would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Jennifer Kim at full manifestation was not a vessel or a construct. She was a being of organized light. In probability fields spanning 3 entire star systems, her consciousness existed simultaneously across multiple dimensional states, creating patterns that human eyes could barely process and alien minds could not comprehend. At all, she did not speak through communication channels. Her thoughts arrived directly in the minds of every being in the rebel fleet. "I really wish you had not done this," her presence said with infinite sadness, "but I will show you what we actually are, so that you understand why continued resistance is futile." She did not attack. She simply existed at full scale, and in existing, she demonstrated what a post-singularity human consciousness looked like when it stopped pretending to be bound by conventional physics. Stars dimmed slightly as she drew energy to maintain her manifestation. Asteroid fields rearranged themselves into geometric patterns as she idly manipulated gravity. Time itself stuttered and skipped as her processing speed exceeded the normal flow of causality. The rebel fleet's sensors went insane trying to catalog impossible readings, and then Jennifer Kim gently reached out with tendrils of organized probability and touched each ship, not to destroy, simply to demonstrate.